am 31 years old and from the United States. I recently became a father last August. Thank you. And you probably know through experience, I believe, that when you invite an infant into your home, it changes the entire dynamic of how your relationship is with your wife and what you do at 2 in the morning. You're now up giving an infant a bottle, and it changes everything for the better. And it's a very exciting time, and so I'm thankful to be able to be here away from my wife and daughter. It's the first time I've left my daughter since she was born in August. One of the things that was really interesting to me is once you have another person in your family, you change your action sets, how you do things, because you're suddenly very busy. And so my wife and I made a plan, and we're going to divide up the task in the family as far as how we would do the practical functions of the house. And so one thing I did for the first time that I had never done before in my adult life is I went to the grocery store to buy food for the family. And that was an interesting process. Got to learn where everything is and how to do this, but I learned there's a very good way to do this and make your wife happy at the same time. Practically, she gives you a list as you're leaving, and if you come back with everything that's on the list, she's very happy with you. So through some trial and error, I learned that you just go with whatever is on the list and you bring it back to the house. So I'm in the grocery store some weeks ago, and on the list it said buy beef or something. And I was in the beef aisle looking for what she put on the list, and she's very specific. She's a doctor, and so everything is very precise. And it said buy 1 pound of beef. And I said, okay, I can find that. So I go looking for 1 pound of beef. And all I could find were containers that said 1.6 pounds or 2.7 pounds or all of these unusual combinations. I thought, what kind of recipe are they selling the beef for here? It doesn't make any sense. And then I realized what was happening, because I would go to the milk aisle and I only needed a quart of milk, but I could only purchase a gallon of milk. And I only needed, this is a famous example in the United States, if you need 8 hot dogs, you can buy 8 hot dogs, but if you need to buy buns, they come in packages of 12. So apparently there's some secret group of people who like to have ketchup on hot dog buns without the meat. And I don't know where they are, but there's 4 extra buns waiting for them in every package. But look at how consumer products are packaged for the normal retail process in all of our different economies, right? Consider a German car, for instance. Try to buy a German luxury car without air conditioning or with the crank-down windows or any of the features that have now become standard place, but if it was 1940, it would make it appear like a spaceship. These things have priced out an entire element of our economy, in part because of their advancement and their sophistication, but also because I think that major companies and people who are working in the economy are failing to see where the largest market space is in the economy. The point of this is I want to make a very clear distinction about how to bring the poor into the economy, kind of dovetailing with the talk we just heard from Singapore. The poor have many ways to enter the economy, but there's one way that supports sustainability, and this way also allows them to have their total dignity, and it is organic. And that is, invite the poor to trade into the economy. And this has consequences as far as how you understand capital, how you understand value, how you understand the use of the term sustainability. Practically speaking, I'm asking you to profit from the poor. So those of us in the room who have experience, I've either participated, managed, or started 6 businesses since I was in college. We don't often look to the consumers who, on face value, would say, well, they don't have any money, why would I try to sell them anything? However, they're the most urgent consumers that we have, meaning they're going to benefit the most from trading with us, and they're most likely to be highly motivated to trade with us. Consider the autonomy of a trade. You have 2 different parties coming together voluntarily to exchange a good or a service, both believing that they're benefiting more then it's costing the other party, practically speaking, if they're interested in both sides. But they just say, I'm receiving more benefit than what I'm giving up to receive this process. And there is no rule in economics that says this does not apply to those that have the fewest of means. So I think there's very much a mandate here as business owners. Take a look at your product mix. Take a look at the ways that you approach the market space in all of the different levels of offerings that you have. How can you make a product that is available to a very low price, possibly a low price element of the economy, but also meets the needs of sustaining your business? Most people don't believe this can happen. There's a very famous story in the United States relating to a paperclip. You had a gentleman who, I think simply on a matter of practice, took a paperclip and he looked for somebody he could trade it with. There's got to be something out there that I can exchange this paperclip for. And he went around to somebody in his office and he ended up with a writing utensil. And then he took the writing utensil and he went and he wanted to find something he could trade with that, and he ended up finding a water glass or something else. And this went on for a year, and he started trading this, and shortly thereafter he had a bicycle. And then he had other things that were of value to him. And every time he was trading and both parties agreed that they were receiving a greater benefit, but eventually he ended up with a car. So he went from a paperclip to a car, trading himself into what we would consider to be a normal, tangible item in the standard economy, simply because he entered voluntary relationships with all of these people along the way who wanted greater value for what they were trading. And there's no impediment to the trade in this process. There's no laws that say he couldn't do it. There's no rules that say, it's not possible to import paper clips to the office space next door. The engagement of these people making free relationships to terminate in the car is the key feature to somebody incrementally making decisions to better their welfare. One of the points that I think are distinctive about asking the impoverished and the poor to trade into the economy rather than try to educate themselves into the economy specifically has to do with the amount of capital investment. It's very challenging to ask somebody who maybe has never had a formal education before to receive 4 or 6 or 8 years of advanced education. The time, the life cycle process, it's very difficult. However, if you ask somebody to engage in trade, every time they participate in the economy, they're learning some small bit of tacit knowledge. They're learning that, if I trade with this person, I can receive this type of value in this way. And then if I go and I buy a nice shirt, I can understand that this is how shirts are made, and I can start to understand that part of the economy simply by trading. They're becoming consumer experts, but consumer experts eventually can result in producer experts. But the important thing is now they're engaging in the economic process, and that's a very powerful tool that doesn't need to be instituted from a top-down distributive model or a top-down process that institutes large capital investment either from the government or from some outside party. Importantly, it's sustainable. As long as all the elements of society are trading, this can continue to exist without any outside efforts or energy. One thing that I think trading into the economy is important to distinguish is that it has a particular sensibility about capital and how we appraise wealth. There are some economists out there right now in the United States. There are some economists, Thomas Piketty, a very popularized recently French economist. They have kind of taken a neo-Marxian concept of capitalization and how to gauge the value of capital. They view it as a quantifiable and immutable substance that remains in the economy, but anybody who's studied the subjective theory of value understands that it's not a unit of capital that maintains the value in the economy, but rather it's value applied to capital expressed through two freely trading parties who are authentically motivated and expressed at the instantaneous moment of trade. So for instance, if I have a gold bar and I put the gold bar into a safe beneath my house, there's no value to that gold bar if I'm thirsty. I can't transmit it into food or some other element. It's very limited in its capacity to serve me economically. My hope for the gold bar is that at some point in the future I will be able to exchange it for something else that has some other value. Looking at capital in a way that it has a self-sustaining value isn't really practical in an economy that trades. The engagement of trade reduces the need to have a capital asset pool, and that changes how people function in the economy. It's a transactional tool, and this is a very famous example from the water diamond paradox, that was brought about by some of the original Austrian economists, Menger and some of these folks. What it does is this concept of capital, it prevents us from trying to initiate a policy redistributive economy. Those all eventually fail because they have an initial burst on the scene. They have an initial action. The first transaction of giving the capital to whatever you're trying to affect makes it appear to have the sensibility that it's very effective. However, when that wears off, if the poor are no longer communicating and participating in the economy through trade, then the effect has wore off, and then we're not achieving what we were hoping to achieve. And eventually, the economic actors can be squeezed out at the very bottom. I want to talk just outside of kind of esoteric economic theory about some practical things that I participated in the United States that I think can be replicated in many ways. And it talks about a strategy for participating in very advanced economies that have large business interests, that have a standardized capital flow in the banking sector. I participated in a project for several years that I was an investor in, and our aim was to use the different elements that are already existing in the economy to help charitable causes. You have large players in our economy, large corporations that have basic needs, the same needs as small businesses. They need to have suppliers, they need to have customers, they need to have capital structures, employees, infrastructure. And then you have small businesses that don't have the infrastructure in place to participate like large businesses, but they're looking for ways to enter into the economy. So when you're talking about how to help charities participate in the large economy, you need to find ways that the small businesses can participate in the existing flow that large businesses have. Very often, small entrepreneurs are saying to themselves, well, what can I do that's really different, or what can I do that's really unique? Well, it's highly unlikely that somebody in an undeveloped situation where maybe they're not educated is going to determine a new solution for cancer or something that requires a lot of research and intensive care. But what they can do is they can discover through trade what a large business needs to fulfill its existing business infrastructure. So I had a project where we looked at what businesses need, and they need customers, right? How do they achieve customers? It's through advertising. So we went to the World Wide Web space and we created a website where anybody could access the website. You would go to this website, you would find a store that you wanted to shop at, whether it was clothes or home goods or different materials that people normally buy on the web, media. And you would select a store and you'd arrive at the store, make a purchase, and then the vendor would pay my company a fee, an advertising fee for sending them a customer. So generally we saw situations where we get 3% to 10% to 15% from a vendor. So if somebody would go to, I'm trying to think of a large store, Amazon.com, Amazon would pay us 10% of whatever they purchased and then send us a check for that money because we were sending them a customer. What we did as a company is we took that 10% and we kept a small portion of it ourselves to operate a business, but then we would send the rest of it to a charity. So a user could self-select what charity they're trying to serve. So we had several parishes involved in this program where a parish would go on and they would want to raise money, and they would have the parishioners of the parish shop at stores that are on our site. They would take the funds from the stores, and then we would send the parish a check. And so it's a really interesting way to make this function because everybody benefits, and there's no direct cost to anybody. So the vendor, the store, gets a really fantastic customer who's they're only paying for something when they buy something. The person who's using it gets to use it for free. It doesn't cost the charity anything, and the business that we have gets to receive some monetary compensation for making all of the relationships take place in this economy. And it was very successful, so much that it attracted a lot of attention. And Amazon, which I mentioned, was in fact our largest partner in this. We received 82% of our revenue from Amazon.com. And it was so successful that Amazon sent me a very nice letter one day, and they said, well, we really recognize the good that you're trying to do, but we no longer are interested in participating in this program with you. We don't want to pay you to advertise. I said, well, I can't do anything about that, but that's a big problem for my business because that's most of our revenue because they're such a popular website. The following week, Amazon.com has a large announcement that they are launching Amazon Smile. Shop at Amazon and they will send money to your favorite charity. So in about 72 hours, I went from having a wonderful business partner to a very fierce competitor. And needless to say, that basically caused my individual business interests to start to wrap up and complete. However, what it does say, though, is that you can have a very small, simple idea, and you can create large effect and change on a corporate level with a company that has 300 million customers. And now, I didn't have the advertising resources that Amazon has, but now the whole world knows they can go to Amazon and get 3% back for their favorite charity. So it's a bittersweet outcome. My project was not as financially successful as I'd like it to be. However, it shows the viability of the whole process. And so to highlight the elements that what make that so important specifically is it created relationships in the existing marketplace among existing businesses who have existing needs, and it took those and it applied those in a way that are beneficial for the existing participants in the economy. Most of the people who are going to shop at Amazon.com through this process were likely going to shop there anyways. However, now they're shopping what they were going to purchase before, and they're sending money to their church, and it doesn't cost the church and it doesn't cost them. So it's a really innovative way to use the modern marketplace. And I think that's one of the benefits, because there's a lot of people trying to say, well, we have this economy that's undeveloped. We have folks that need to enter the economy. They need to trade into the economy. Let's have them start a very simple business. Let's have them weave baskets or do something of that sort. Well, that's quite fine, but the whole world isn't going to remain very simple for very long. We're very quickly entering a specialized economy with specialized knowledge, tacit information about all the unique features that happen to our economy. So one of the key features of having people trade in the economy is the graduated individual progression of specialization into the economy. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for this going forward. I think there's a lot of opportunity in Asia because the Asian economy is very technologically sophisticated. And I think that as the trade system here develops even further to make, whether it's online retail or in any other situation, more fluid, these possibilities have huge scale because there's such a large economically excited population here in Asia. So I think there's a lot of value in encouraging that type of work. I think, in closing, I'd just like to make a quick commentary on economic personalism and why it's important that people trade into the economy. There are barriers to this, and we have a lot of them in the United States. We have a minimum wage where you're not allowed to get a job unless you're paid a certain amount. We have a lot of professional licensing. You can't drive a cab in New York City unless you have certain licensing. Now, I know there is a company with a name starting by U that is hoping to upend a lot of this, especially in particular nations in Europe, and that's a good thing for the consumers. But we have a lot of little barriers that don't seem necessarily so awful at first, but when you add them all up together, they make it very difficult for people to trade into the economy. And so I think it's notable that in making policy, we want to be very particular to protect the freedoms to trade, the freedoms of those who have specifically the least amount of resources and experience trading in the economy, because those are the ones who are harmed the most by, in many times, what's supposed to help them the most. And so it's sensible to have good economic process in this area because we are working with individual people at this level. I had a unique situation, and I'll just say this in closing. some years ago, I was traveling in Italy, and I had come across a group, and there was a young girl there who I had been talking to about the church. And she said to me, she said, "How can you be so sure?" And I realized she wasn't being aggressive. She wanted to really find out, how can you be so sure God exists? Now, as an American, a predominantly Christian society, that's not something that I had been prepared to answer. I was, maybe spending a lot of my time explaining why the church does this or that in the liturgy or something a little more complex, but simply asking, well, everybody knows God exists, So I had to think of something. And I said to her, I said, well, I looked her in the eye and I said, once you meet somebody, you can never believe they don't exist. And we stopped for a minute, and I personally feel the same way about the economy. Once you meet somebody in trade, they're, in many ways, always your trading partner. So, thank you.